Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I know this is going to be a bit odd for the channel since I do like to keep everything clear cut with what's going on, and this video is going to start with random B-roll of something Mario related, but just keep with me because I promise it'll be worth it. As you've seen during this series, we were looking at an indie game, the first for the channel. I wanted to call this new series the Steam series. Frankly, I wanted to call it the Steam Shovel originally, but I changed it since we're probably going to be looking at indies with promise rather than just random games that most of are going to be trash. I wanted to do this because I've been feeling kind of bored recently with the long AAA series we were doing, and have been seeing more and more indie stuff recently, and realized that without anyone really reporting on it, Steam has been coming out with tons and tons of indie startups rather than the trash that it's been more defined with. So I figured, what the heck, we'll change the schedule from a 2-game schedule to a 3-game one. Also, before we get started here, I do want to say that you are welcome to post recommendations in the comments for other games to look at. If I do get any, I will look at their pages and see if they're interesting enough to put on the list. Obviously, there are no guarantees that I'll get to it. I've already got a huge list, and definitely no phone games right now, no way to record them, and frankly, no interest. If it is a phone port to Steam, then sure, I'll take a look at it, but, still no guarantees there. So, what ended up being the first game off my big list was The Vagrant. Now, I completely forgot where I heard about this game. I've been mostly culling the list from videos of prominent indie Metroidvanias and Souls-likes, since that was what I was interested in doing, and then pulling some other stuff from genre search and indie compilation channels, so I have no idea who recommended this game. For those of you who are going to make the obvious joke, yes, this first choice was randomly chosen, and it wasn't just because of the damn eye candy the game is trying to sell itself with. Ironically, while on the store page it looks like a boob game stereotype, The Vagrant doesn't actually have any sexual content in it. It's just one of those random games where the protagonist is half naked and no one cares, making you wonder why they bothered doing that design decision. Obviously, the reason was that OTK Games made this one for a service that releases 100 to 200 games every week, but in-game, it looks like a really odd choice. Okay, so The Vagrant was one of the action platform Metroidvanias that came from the huge list, starring The Vagrant, obviously, who is a traveling mercenary who gets caught in a Metroidvania situation. Originally, all she's out for is a bit of coin, but ends up quickly getting embroiled in a magical malarkey. After her first mission, where she, in classic Dark Souls fashion, gets embarrassingly defeated in a forced failure scenario, she ended up getting hexed by the witch she ended up helping in the first place. The witch needs the Vagrant, yeah, I've forgotten all these characters' actual names, so bear with me, for an unnamed task, and therefore keeps her chained with the hex that will either kill her or alert the witch immediately that she's disobeying so that the witch can kill her personally. While going on the task, the Vagrant is given the witch's apprentice as an unwelcome companion to make sure that the Vagrant keeps to the task and doesn't get any plans or sneaking suspicions. Afterwards, the Vagrant is sent on the usual Metroidvania mission. Run around, kill bosses, save the land, collect MacGuffins, etc., kill big bad villain. The Vagrant sells itself not only on the boobage, but also on its painted looking art style. It does make the game stand out, and it is really pretty and intricate, but it does come with some issues, such as the characters not being expressive, janky animations, and the foreground mixing with the combat, but it mostly does work. It does the job and shows that the team behind this were actually trying to make a good game. The general combat is pretty lackluster on the other hand, typical waves of enemies, and you are only allowed to use a variety of swords in combat with similar animations to each other in comparison to something like Aria of Sorrow, where magic and sword attacks get different hitboxes and utilities, whereas the Vagrant relies more on a skill tree to give the player upgrades, instead of items that are scattered around the world. Unfortunately, the skill tree does not give customization to the player, since the skills get unlocked on the same paths as everybody else, and there's no opportunity to specialize in anything due to all the playstyles being the same sword combat. On top of this, there are special moves that you can use in combat that are pretty powerful if you integrate them into your usual combat style. I didn't do that since they're actually clunky to use and the game's not super responsive to their controls, and taking a second or two to get an attack ready does make a big difference in a genre where you're mostly getting mobbed by enemies all the damn time. Like the skill tree, there aren't a lot of special moves available, so most of the assigned special attacks are going to be the same in every playthrough. Okay, so while the combat's not impressive like a Hollow Knight, OTK did put some effort into putting together a solid backstory for the game. The Vagrant was a special sort of spell sword called a Rune Warden in this world. Her entire family of Rune Wardens ended up getting struck down and brutally murdered by the Academy of Wizards, which the witch is affiliated with. The Academy hates the Rune Wardens because they consider them heathens, mostly because they're jealous of the special powers and prestige they once carried. So they ended up calling them dangerous weirdos and got them killed. The Vagrant's big sister protected her during the final hour, which is what ended up keeping her alive. Obviously, she's been keeping the secret and using those skills to be a successful mercenary to put food on the table. Her Rune Warden prowess eventually got her to where she is today because the witch can't do her own dirty work this time around. Throughout this journey, she meets big demon bosses that she has to kill, and I will give points to OTK at this point. They made a great suite of bosses for this game. They have cool designs, unique attacks that bring a challenge to the table, well thought out gimmicks, and good showmanship. I did enjoy fighting the bosses of this game. They aren't going to be huge standouts like Ornstein and Other Guy, but for what a Metroidvania fan is here for, these can compare to other Rogues Galleries like Super Metroid's middle-of-the-road stuff. Obviously, this isn't going to be Ridley's level, but it's on the level of the forgettable ones that were in the middle of the game. I think the boss fights are brought down by the lack of combat options and the badly implemented dodge roll, which provides total invincibility for too long and by itself can cheese a lot of boss fights, which should have been big and dangerous in concept but ended up being a bunch of easily dodged nonsense due to the incredible power of the Vagrant doing cartwheels. Halfway through the journey, the Vagrant acquires a magical ring that ends up breaking the spell that the witch was controlling her with. She keeps this secret until she has that moment to escape. Later on down the line, closer to this opportunity, the requests of the witch start becoming more sinister. She needs the Vagrant to lead her apprentice into a hideout of the Academy for some piece of the ritual she needed for an unclear reason. She agrees to go and finally reveals what the witch has been after all this time as she gets into the lower levels of the hideout. The witch is looking to go into the plane of the dead in order to access a sealed being of untold power for her selfish gain. The being that has been tormenting the Vagrant's family in secret for the last few decades. The Vagrant's father spent the last half of his life studying the being in order to defeat it and ended up sealing the being away with his own body and power so that it could stop ravaging the world and his loved ones. Possibly the being was also using its power through the witch to mind control the Vagrant's sister, as that boss that defeated her at the beginning of the game ended up being that exact person who didn't die in the final hour. Basically, the being keeps coming back to the Vagrant's family and tormenting them because them being Rune Wardens ended up making the entire family the perfect vessel for the being so that he can end up destroying the world inside of their bodies, whoever he decides to pick. The end boss of this game is one of those boring, pure demon type things that was imprisoned for 1 billion years and whose only existence is destroying everything. That, at the end of the day, is all this guy is about. At the end of the game, the witch does get access to this pure evil power of the being and ends up being a giant evil angel of all power that the Vagrant has to kill as the final boss. Like Symphony of the Night, The Vagrant also has that optional ending change where you have to go do a few chores around the overworld in order to get the true ending, which I also did for this video. Unfortunately, it did not come with a change in the final boss. You do get to fight a few new bosses, but other than the last one, they are all super duper weak for the end game content, for which you are probably going to be facing them when you get to this point. The final battle of the side quest is just a bullshit monster that can cut your health in half with one attack and telegraphs everything terribly. The best advice for dealing with the zombie bear that I've found is just to down all of your infinite rage items and spam expensive special attacks and hope that you can beat this bear in a DPS race. And speaking of major design flaws, I will once again give credit at this point to OTK that for the most part of the game, it works as intended and there aren't any glitches or crashes. But there was a point during the game where they definitely screwed up and did not tell the player something that was really important. I know this because this was in a prominent Steam thread on the game with a few replies before myself from a bunch of the game's players. At the second or third level of the game, the designers expected that the player would have upgraded through the skill tree far enough at that point to unlock the double jump. Instead of the double jump being an item found in the world, it's something that is unlocked on the skill tree, and a few players ended up not knowing about it because the game didn't tell them that they ended up needing it. So when they started going to the levels that required the double jump to go through, they ended up getting really stuck and not being able to go anywhere. This part of my experience with The Vagrant made me appreciate even more the work that Nintendo games usually go through in order to make extra super duper sure to have this not happen with their level design. And they will give you ways out of their levels if you end up running out of ammo, or getting hit by an enemy the wrong way, or just simply mistiming a jump if you aren't supposed to fall into that hole and die an instant death. This part of the game was purely a design mistake that the guys should have fixed or QA should have caught. It is that simple. I can definitely see what they were trying to do, but at that point, you still need to tell the player where they can get that ability, otherwise people are going to get confused and quit playing the game since they don't know where the ability is that is required to actually go through this level. The game does end with the Vagrant escaping the being and either resealing the being in the darkness that it originally escaped from, or the Vagrant ending up getting lost in the void due to the being's influence. At the end of the day, The Vagrant is a good Metroidvania, but unfortunately it's just not much to write home about. I'm probably going to bring this up in other videos, but the indie market has been overloaded, legitimately, by all these startup companies and individuals for the past few years, and unfortunately, the days when this game would impress people are very long gone. You have to compete to be the highest quality game, or you're going to end up being forgotten software. I wish I could give OTK more points for the pretty art style and a well-designed game, but the sad matter of the fact is that The Vagrant only has the standard features that you would expect from any Metroidvania game, with just a few things that ended up making it any sort of unique. This is on a store that's selling Hollow Knight and Shovel Knight, and this game just is not going to make the cut to be remembered alongside those indie success stories. But on the other hand, I bought this game for $4, and for $4, it's an amazingly good deal. If you have a day or two free, then I would say go for it, but don't expect a masterpiece game here. Well, I wish I had something more eye-catching for the first game in the Steam series, but I guess The Vagrant will just have to do. I did enjoy the game, it's definitely a good one. I just wish that it had a lot more oomph and panache in it to make it stand out. I'll just finish up this introductory video with the usual final scoreboard. And wish you all out there a victory for gamers. Thanks for watching, and check back next time for our next indie discovery on the list.